Hi, Marina.
Hi.
How is New York today?
It is very warm.
Well, that is awesome. It's warm here in central Indiana. And my guest is Marina from the Beaties. And we are talking about the Beaties, about the power of theater, about the Patient Voices event that's coming up, and all about the schedule that you keep that is just incredible. So let's start off. I know that you've got a big event coming up. It's the Patient Voices event. Tell me about the event and when it is and where it is and that sort of thing.
Sure. So the Patient Voice 2016 is basically the culmination of 2 years worth of work, 2 years worth of our work that we've been building up our organization and our programming to address all of the emotional and mental health aspects of diabetes, of living with diabetes. And to be clear, we're definitely not addressing all of them. There's a lot more than 2 years worth of work on that. But the event is a unique opportunity to get everybody together to speak openly and to connect around the parts of living with a chronic health condition that can be a challenge. And we offer something very unique to this, which is that we offer puppetry as a creative tool to help facilitate this expression. Because I think we've probably, I certainly have, and I know others have through this work, encountered this sort of silence that makes it hard to talk about the stuff that affects our lives. So the event is for that. So the first part of it is our programming, and the second part of it is a panel discussion with various leaders from sort of different sides of the space. So we have Manny Hernandez for patient advocacy, Dr. Henry Onholt of Type 1 Diabetes Exchange, he's from the endocrinology side, Heather Stuckey, who was actually one of the lead behavioral health researchers for the DAWN-2 study, that's Novo Nordisk's study on what are the impacts of diabetes on the psychosocial, right? She was a lead qualitative researcher, so she's on the panel. She also has Type 1 herself. We have Daniel Spencer, who is from narrative medicine. And then we have Tim Cunningham, who is a nurse, a PhD candidate in public health, and he is on the board of Clowns Without Borders, which is a troupe that travels around the world and delivers the healing power of humor through clown in areas that are in crisis. So that's a panel discussion that's happening, and then we have an award ceremony for Dr. Jason Baker and Dr. Barbara Anderson, who are both clinicians who are incredibly committed to the power and the role of the patient voice in diabetes care.
Well, that is quite a bit, but let's back up for a minute and talk about, it's going to be at the Abigail Adams Theater, is that correct? And
yeah.
That's a historic theater in New York, is that my understanding?
It's actually not a theater. It's this auditorium. Yeah. It will have a stage, and we'll have seats, etc. But it's more like it's more an event venue space. It's owned by the Colonial Dames of America, which is a colonial era historic preservation society across the United States, and this is the New York chapter. So they have this beautiful historic space that we're hosting the event in.
Well, I've seen pictures of it, and the building, you just would not imagine that building would be in that spot. And that's part of what I think really gives warmth to your event. And I think it is so exciting. Now, when folks go in, there's going to be a presentation by the Beaties. And can you talk a little bit about that? And I think there might be a new puppet.
Yeah. Well, so maybe for new viewers or for an audience whom I haven't met with yet, again, we use puppetry to give form and shape to this invisible stuff. And so after the wine and food reception, we will have a theater performance, 2 performances actually. One is, it's difficult to describe because it's living theater, right? But if you could imagine for a second that the emotional trajectories that you go through on a daily basis are now being staged in front of you, for you, and with you, while you're surrounded by the people whom you love and also your fellow D community, that's what the heart of the programming is, and that's what our work is. We work carefully. I say that we put our ear to the ground to listen to what is the experience that we go through as people who live with a chronic condition. And there's no one answer. You know, there's a very wide range of responses. But there are themes that end up coming to the forefront that can be connected through. And so one of the things that's really exciting is that the second program is we launched a project on the experience of complications, and we call it the invisible elephant. And in order to speak about this, we've created a new friend.
Oh.
Hey, Rick. Is she bothering you?
She is not bothering me.
Oh, she bothers me all the time.
But it is very good to meet you.
Thank you. You too. So, what's she yapping about?
Well, we're going to talk about the event on March 20th.
Oh, yeah. She keeps talking about it.
And your part in the event.
Me?
Are you going to have a part?
Maybe.
Yeah, I bet. Now, you're going to be in the part about complications, and complications are very difficult for us to speak about.
Shh. Oh, yeah. No. No. Gosh, we wouldn't talk about that. It's more like, you know, I'll just come on and you'll look at me and then I'll breathe and then you'll breathe and then we're definitely not going to talk about that.
Well,
Shh.
I think in my life, complications are a very important part of diabetes. And I am so glad that the BDs has taken on the project of discussing complications. Particularly the surveys this past year, the Twitter chats have been amazing. And I'm looking forward to what I might learn from you that you've learned from us.
What do you think about that?
Because you know I'm going to be watching.
Him? Yes.
Everybody. Yeah.
You didn't tell me that. I'm very sorry.
Well, I know that there are plans for a live feed, and we're going to hopefully going to be able to view it live throughout the country. But I also know that tickets are available for the event, and the event is, as you said, panel discussions, 2 performances, a wine event. It is going to be quite an afternoon. How many people do you expect at the event?
Our maximum capacity is 175, but we're expecting about 150.
Yeah. Great.
It's gonna be
So,
rocking. Oh, there's also a live jazz band. I don't think I mentioned that.
oh yeah,
Shio Shalva. They're fabulous. So we'll have live music as well.
that sounds so cool. Now, the event that's happening is really a culmination of activities that the Beatties has been involved in for several months. And can you tell us about how those things have translated into the performance and into the event that you're going to be having?
The event is really it's the culmination of 2 years worth of work, and how the how we worked for the Invisible Elephant Project is that we had a survey. We had over 900 responses to the survey. We asked how people think and feel about this topic of diabetes complications. And then we set up a series of interviews with individuals, one-on-one in-depth interviews. Everybody's privacy is respected. And it was from a combination of both the 900 responses and then these in-depth conversations that we started to look at, like, what's the heart of the matter here? You know, what's the part of this? What are the parts in the machine that keep getting a little kink, right? And one of the things definitely that, for example, that we heard over and over is that, like, oh, well, you know, I don't talk about it with my family because I don't want to worry them, you know, or I don't talk about it with my friends because I just don't want to bring that up. And that's, you know, that makes sense. But at the same time, these thoughts exist, right? So we're working to create an opportunity for this to be expressed. And there's a lot more. There's a lot more into that, and we're looking for the way to secure funding so that we can take this project forward, because we just launched this because we knew that there was a need, and the response has been overwhelming. You know, what puppetry brings is that the puppet can go through stuff that I can't allow myself to. You know, and by the puppet going through it, you are able to go through it. And that's the power of this medium. So it's the launch, it's the premiere of this project, and it's just the first step. You know, there's a lot more to be done. And we hope, you know, our goal is to bring this work to as many places around the country as we can, for both providers and families and adults, teenagers and adults. This isn't a young child program.
The Beatties has been such a great success in really all kinds of age groups over the last 2 years. And your efforts have just been amazing. What have you learned over the last couple of years that helps you prepare for this kind of program?
Several things. That's a really good question. The need to listen with the utmost sensitivity. The need to take out my own agenda or perspective or bias out of the picture in order to allow the person in front of me or the group in front of me to step forth. The understanding of how different people's frame of reference is. Because what we're doing is unusual, right? Puppets. You know, you think puppets, you probably think of Sesame Street, and Sesame Street is amazing. But that there's another application to this medium that does end up happening through Sesame Street too, but that we're bringing together in a different way. So finding the ways to translate this work so that people understand why this happens and why this exists, and really, most often is that when people encounter our work, you know, that that communication occurs. So, and also really diving into like what is all of this psychological stuff, that we're all living through. And Dr. Kenneth Gorfinkel, who's our scientific director, he has a PhD in medical psychology, so his specific focus has been on, as I say, paving a path to joyful health for people with chronic illness, which is also the BD's mission, but that has been his life's work. And having all of these conversations with him as to what are the limits of therapy and what are the limits of art. Because we sit in this strange in-between space where we're not therapy. I can't be a therapist, nor can I take liability for that. And yet the work ends up being therapeutic, and it does something on a community level that's really, really incredible. So, how do these spaces interlap? So a lot of questioning, a lot of careful listening, and a lot of putting yourself out there.
I think one of the crazy things about your work is that folks tend to associate it with children. And in fact, this does have not this particular program, but the BD's does have a child orientation style. But in my watching it over the years, I know I, in particular, have been touched by it, and I'm certainly not a child. I'm far from it. Do you see that in adults who who watch or participate in one of your programs? Do you see that they find deep meaning oftentimes in what you're doing?
I call children adults with smaller shoes, or rather, I call adults children but with bigger shoes.
Mm.
Yes, and we have children's programming where it's a lot more interactive and it's a lot more playful, and kids are yelling and screaming and laughing, and what we say is that we kind of just basically build on the sophistication of the content, but the dialogue that we're engaged with is essentially the same. We ask an 8-year-old the same question that we ask a 28-year-old, that we ask a 58-year-old, but it's your answer that has changed, and that's the amazing part, because it's kind of like the spiral of growth and understanding as somebody grows up and goes through the world. And I think what's so important is that, and this is for me personally, since I've had type 1 since I was 2, is that the questions that we're asking, I never felt were asked of me. And that's a pretty big failing, I think, of our medical education system. So what our want and purpose and aim is to build this conversation with the people who carry a chronic health condition, so that it's not an unexplored space, so that this is able to be safely handled, so that we can be in community to talk about the hard stuff and the really rewarding stuff. It's a complex but comprehensive picture, and we want to be asking the questions that I think are not being asked enough, and give people the opportunity to answer them.
So some of the things that I find really appealing about the BD's is first the creativity that goes into how the program addresses chronic health matters. And is that creativity, do you think it's a communal thing that happens in the performance space, or is it really a mix of what you as a performer bring to the performance space and what the community generates back to it?
Let me see if I understand your question. So wait, are you asking where does the creativity live in this?
Mm-hmm. Does it live on both sides of the stage?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, I always say that stories happen in the space between us, and same thing with the creative act. So, you know, why is creativity empowering, right? I mean, just take it back to this like basic level. Like you have a paintbrush and you put a mark on the page, right? And suddenly, like, you've affirmed something concrete that's your mark. Like, you've done that. You know, it's like your signature, right? You know, people develop their signatures, right? So the creative act, in a way, is a signature in multiple media, whether it's in clay or paint or puppetry or theater. And the act of creating that expression that gets translated, right? Because it's not just speech, right? It goes through a different medium, right? So there's this interpretation that happens there, and then interpretation happens back, right? And so now there's a conversation happening back and forth over this thing that has arisen out of different places. So yeah, I think I think I think what theater uniquely does is that it takes powerful stories, and if it's done well, it opens them up for you to be able to see them in a new light, right? Then that opens you to all of these responses, right? And then in our programming, we take those responses and we work with them. You know, we have different exercises and ways to think about, and like in order for you as a participant to better understand and process your experience and what's happening in the community and people around you. So there's definitely no one source for that creativity. You know, no man is an island. It's, you know, and whatever creative decisions I make have come from the history of my, 29 years of existence that have been encountered with hundreds and hundreds of people. So that's such a good question.
Well, it might be a good question. So, tell me about the emotion that's generated in the audience. What do you typically see? What kind of emotional experience do people typically leave your performance with? I know when I see it, I get very emotional about it. It is almost, it almost makes me cry. Not tears of sadness, but tears of saying that somebody understands.
Right.
Do you find that in your audience on a typical, or do you find other kinds of emotions that get generated? For instance, do you find anger?
I think anger definitely comes. And anger is a good and a hard one to work with, because in a way anger is always a cover for something that's underneath. Mm-hmm. All responses are welcome.
Right.
Right? And we absolutely find, I think the importance of this work is that ability for recognition. Because if you allow yourself to connect to what's happening in front of you, you're now in a community of people who are connecting to this shared experience, right? And you're all going through this emotional trajectory. And then you have a choice. You can either be honest and be honest to what you're going through. Look to your neighbor and say, this is where I am. And your neighbor can look back to you and say, this is where I am. And now you've built a bridge, right? You can also make the choice to not do that. And we've definitely had that. Or, it really is, it's a much smaller percentage of people for whom this work, they don't connect to it. And that's absolutely fine. You can't have 100% overall. But we have a very high engagement level because of the reason that there's a sense of recognition. I think I personally, as an artist, strive for awe. I want to I wrote a personal statement a few weeks ago, kind of for my own, like, why am I doing this, right? It's like, and I want to bring the most amount of beauty possible into the places that hurt, in order that we're be able to better carry the things that hurt. Because somehow this like mix of emotions ends up happening in a way where you soften, right? Because those tears are not tears of anguish, but they certainly have trickles of pain, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they
Oh,
also,
yeah, definitely.
but there's so much there. There's also breath, right? And there's also somehow an enjoyment and gratitude, and all of that is mixed in there. So yeah, there's no one response, but there is. I think this is why we say that this can be a public health intervention, because each encounter builds community, and it builds this emotional health and this emotional processing in the engagements. And this is what we're working, and this is what the Patient Voice event is about. Is to exactly for this to happen, and then to have a conversation about it, and then to have a celebration.
Well, I think my experience, and as you know, I feel very strongly about the bees and about its impact. And I think that my personal experience has been so, I don't know, it's difficult sometimes, but it's also cleansing. Because, as I said, for the very first time, I think somebody else recognizes what I have felt for 42 years. And I think that I'm not alone. I think that most of the audience at one of your events thinks the very same thing. You express so well in puppetry what we collectively, as people with diabetes, feel and what we go through. And I am so appreciative of that. I just can't express to you enough how appreciative I am of somebody doing that. It's been a long time since somebody's given me that that emotional recognition, and I'm so pleased. And I hold you in high esteem, but I just really, I just don't know that you know how important your work is. One of the things.
You're already talking. Look at that. Look at that. Look.
You're back.
Yeah, well, I had to save the moment or something, I don't know, man. You're going too deep. Bring in the bass.
So listen, what is your name?
Well, this chick took my name, actually.
Yeah.
I'm the original Marina.
Well.
Oh, really? Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we're going to maybe decide this on March 20th. What do you think? All right. Could you go away now? Sure.
Sabrina, one of the things that we talk about in the BDs a lot is the renaissance of evidence-based medicine. Tell us about evidence-based medicine and how theater interacts with that.
You are on a roll with these questions. Okay, so to be clear, I am not a doctor, I am not a clinician, I am not a scientist. So in all honesty, I cannot speak truly about evidence-based medicine. Mm-hmm. What I can speak about is how evidence-based medicine is kind of what all of our current medical progress is based on. asking the question, what are the outcomes of this intervention, is like, what's the evidence for this, that this works, right? And there's very, very real value and necessity for that question for obvious reasons. But what that question doesn't include is the subjective personal experience of every single person who lives with a biological condition. And in a way, for all intents and purposes, on our everyday lives, it almost doesn't matter what the biological thing is because we're living our life, right? So there's a renaissance, gently, the bare beginnings of, that's asking for evidence-based medicine to open up, to include these subjective and qualitative measures into itself. So it's not scrapping evidence-based medicine because we've had incredible progress with this paradigm. But there's also been real limits to evidence-based medicine, and there's been actually an abuse of evidence-based medicine because a lot of times, it's in the evidence and the numbers have been tweaked, and
Right.
So as a counterpart to evidence-based medicine, there's the arising of the health humanities and of narrative medicine. And this is the subjective experience of disease. What do you live? How does this affect you? How does this affect your understanding of life? Who are you with this condition? How has all of this worked together and created who you are? And it's not saying all you are is your disease, of course not. But it is saying there's a real space for exploration and dialogue here, and let's have it. Let's include it. I hope that's not too convoluted of an answer.
I don't think so. One more question, and then we'll turn to some questions from the listeners. I think we have 2 or 3. Narrative medicine is such an evolving concept, and I know that there's a lot of work with narrative medicine being done at Columbia right now.
Mm-hmm.
How has that influenced your? How has that work at Columbia, if it has, influenced what you do with the bees?
Yeah, well, actually, one of the people on our panel, Danielle Spencer, is a faculty member at Columbia University's Narrative Medicine program. We've been building a dialogue with the department. I think the work that they have done is essential to create a space in the healthcare culture and understanding for the need for this and what is this. They're really helping to develop a vocabulary and to help me understand. I've read so many essays, by the director, Rita Sharon, and by different faculty there. It's an evolving conversation that is absolutely true. But it helps me also understand what we're doing better. And it makes me ask new questions of our work, which we then ask back to our audiences, and participants. So it ends up being this kind of circular, multi-circular, more like this conversation.
For those who don't know, Columbia publishes a quarterly journal of narrative medicine. It is an awesome journal, can be obtained online. Each quarter they ask for patient submissions. I know that they are interested in submissions from the diabetes community as well as other healthcare communities. And if you get the opportunity, the Columbia Journal of Narrative Medicine is an absolute delight to read, and it refocuses much of what you might think about chronic disease in particular, but really healthcare in general. Mm. So that's my plug for them. They know they don't pay me. Question 1, will Jason Baker be there?
Yes, he will. He's one of our honorees.
Who is Jason Baker? I do not know.
Jason Baker is an endocrinologist at Weill Cornell. He's a doctor, and he actually also has type 1. He was diagnosed as an adult. And he's the founder of Marjorie's Fund, which is an international not-for-profit dedicated to educating and empowering people with diabetes in underserved countries. I think specifically they're doing a lot of work in Africa right now, in getting them access and education and means to sustain themselves in order to be able to continue being able to receive insulin. So, and Jason has been with our organization from the very start, from like the first seed. He was there. So he's remarkable as a doctor and as a human, and we're really thrilled to honor him. And also, of course, Dr. Barbara Anderson, who was one of the founding members of the psychology of type 1 diabetes. So it has been such a pleasure such a gift to get to know her over these past few months, and she'll be there as well as our honoree.
So, question 2, the panel discussion. I know Manny is going to be one of the panelists, and you told us some of the others. What will the panel discussion be about?
Yeah. The panel discussion is focused around what is the patient voice, what is the role of the patient voice, why has the patient voice not been heard, what are still the barriers and limits to it being heard, what is the role of creativity in helping the patient voice to emerge. And of course, a part of that conversation is to kind of step away from that label, patient voice, right? The truth of the matter is that the emotional experience and psychological experience of living with a chronic health condition has been left out of healthcare. And that's a huge part of the patient voice. So we're bringing together a multidisciplinary panel to talk about why has that been, what is the future of this, what are the limits of this, what are the consequences of bringing all of that in. You know, there's a lot of hesitation in kind of opening that space for an understandable reason. You know, doctors only have 15 minutes with their patients. How am I supposed to handle all of that? That's a very, very real concern. And again, what is the role of the creativity and this type of programming that we're doing in helping to facilitate all sides of the care circle? So it's going to be a 30-minute panel, and I think it's going to be a really good conversation. And it will be live streamed, but I definitely recommend to be there live because you can pop in questions, and it's going to be interactive.
We have a question. How can people support the Beaties if they do not live in New York City? Are there opportunities to support the programs, and how would they go about doing that?
We are a not-for-profit. Your support makes our work possible. You can absolutely go on to www.thebeaties.org and become a donor. That is a beautiful way for us to continue working, and it doesn't have to be a huge amount. Getting a $25 gift for me is like, oh, thank you. You love, you appreciate us. So that's one way. Another way is bring us to your local camp, bring us to a conference, bring us to your clinic, bring us, open up your connections to us, saying that, we would love to bring in this programming to where I am. And our hope is that within 2 years, we can be traveling across the country, me being not the only performer, delivering this work in partnership with clinicians and patients.
One more question, the live stream, where can people pick up the live stream at? Good
question. So we haven't released the link yet, but again, if you go onto www.thebeaties.org, and there's a little banner up top that says the Patient Voice 2016. enter your email there. You'll sign up to our mailing list, and we're going to send out the live stream link next week.
Okay.
So that'll be, and it'll be tweeted out and put up on our Facebook page as well.
I lied. One more question. Are the tickets still available?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
They can get those by going online to thebeaties.org and purchasing them, or is there...
There's a little tab that says March 20th. So
Okay.
when you go on the homepage, you'll just see it up top. It says March 20th. You click on that. The tickets are there.
This is both a fundraiser as well as a performance for the Beaties, is that correct?
It is primarily a programming-driven event. It's to say our programs. This is the power of our programming. But yes, I mean, sustainability, as DHF well knows, is very difficult, and we definitely could use your support. Yeah. So if you're able to give, please do.
Thank you very much, Marina. It has been such a joy speaking with you.
You too.
And I hope...
One of our patient ambassadors. I don't know if you guys know that.
I hope I'm going to be watching the event. I so hope it is just absolutely over the moon, exciting. I know it will be. I'm excited by it, and I'm going to be watching in Indiana. So it's going to be super cool. Thank you very much. It is a delight, as always, to talk with you.
Great.
And thank you so much on behalf of everybody at 2 Diabetes for everything you do. You know, our community is large. Our diabetes community is large, and it is such a pleasure for me to be able to talk with people who do so much. But you are definitely part of that. And we are a large, varied community. Thank you for being part of that community. Have a great day.